JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is an anime and manga series infamous for its large cast of zany characters, multiple different parts, and a plethora of iconic moments and concepts. So to create a proper JoJo's video game, it's essential to include all of those points and more. While JoJo's Eyes of Heaven certainly meets those criteria, being chock full of fan service, as well as including a story mode helmed by the actual mangaka of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, it still falls short when it comes to its basic core gameplay. This is JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Eyes of Heaven. Back in 2013, developer CyberConnect 2 worked with publisher Bandai Namco to release JoJo's Bizarre Adventure All-Star Battle on the PS3. It was a 3D fighting game with a large cast of characters and a number of unique fighting mechanics. It sold decently well and was regarded as a pretty solid fighting game. So, a year later, on December 16, 2014, it was unveiled that CyberConnect 2 would be developing the next JoJo's game, Eyes of Heaven, with a number of the game's assets being reused from All-Star Battle. It's even widely speculated that this was originally supposed to be a sequel to All-Star Battle 2. There are even files in-game titled ASB2, but it's not a sequel. Well, not really. The big difference between All-Star Battle and Eyes of Heaven is that while All-Star Battle was a 3D fighting game, it played more along the lines of a game like Soul Calibur. Yes, you can move in a 3D space, but movement was still restricted to a set number of directions, whereas Eyes of Heaven would be a 3D arena fighting game, meaning you had completely free movement around the stage. While I am what some would call an unreasonable hater of arena fighting games, I think in this case, it's an okay decision. You have All-Star Battle already for people who want a more competitive experience, and now you have Eyes of Heaven for a more casual experience. The other key feature of Eyes of Heaven revealed before release would be its original story mode, which would be personally handled by Araki, the mangaka of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. It was also revealed that this game would not receive any paid DLC or include any microtransactions, an issue that fans had had with the original All-Star Battle. This all sounds, pretty good to me. You got an original story by the actual author of the manga, you're listening to fan complaints, this must have been loved on launch. Well, you wouldn't think that looking at the reviews. JoJo's Eyes of Heaven released originally on the PS3 and PS4 in Japan on December 17, 2015, and would later release only on the PS4 in North America on June 28, 2016. It was released to a mixed reception. IGN just didn't even review it. GameSpot gave it a 6 out of 10, and Famitsu a 34 out of 40. On Metacritic, it currently sits at a 61 critic score and a 7.8 user score. While reception wasn't terrible, it seemed to be pointing towards a pretty mediocre game, with the common sentiment being, if you like JoJo's, you'll definitely appreciate the fan service. And if you don't like JoJo's, then there's kind of nothing of value for you here, because the basic gameplay doesn't play well at all. Like I mentioned before, Eyes of Heaven is a 3D arena fighting game, or as Bandai would like to claim, it is a stylish tag JoJo action game. The basic gameplay here is that there are two teams of two trying to deplete their enemies of all 3 of their health bars. You get to choose your own character as well as your partner's character, except your partner will always be an AI unless you play online, which is a laggy mess, because there is no local multiplayer whatsoever. There could be some difficulties implementing local multiplayer, but they really couldn't have just done split screen. Another complaint of mine is that you can't just have a 1v1. In certain battles in the story mode, it's just you against one enemy, but in free battle, you can only have 2v2s, which is pretty annoying because these 2v2s don't handle very well. Your partner will always be AI, and the majority of the time that AI will be absolutely brain dead. I feel like for most matches I played, my partner just wouldn't do anything. I'd be focusing on one enemy and then look over at the other enemy and realize that they are still at full health because my partner has been dicking around instead of attacking them. And speaking of looking over at the enemy, the camera controls also suck. You have free camera control, but you can also lock onto your enemy, which is pretty essential to actually getting things done here, but the lock on is just really bad. It'll constantly get lost or move in suboptimal ways. You can flick the stick to switch targets, but sometimes some stages will have stage hazards and it will lock onto them instead. So you have to flip through a bunch of different targets just to finally get to the guy you're trying to target. And speaking of stages, these stages also suck. They're the kind of arena fighter stages that are really large, so you spend a lot of time just running around and less time actually, fighting. There are also some stages in particular that are just really annoying with their stage hazards. For example, there's this one rooftop stage where everyone just kept falling off the entire match. Someone would get hit once, which is enough to just send them flying off the stage. Or I'd try to jump across a ledge just for my characters to not grab onto the ledge and just fall into the void. The movement doesn't help either, as it's so hard to make any precise movements. And speaking of movement, these controls also suck. Everything feels so stiff and clunky. The lock-on doesn't work half the time, so my attacks or charges just completely miss. And like with the rooftop stage, movement feels awful and it's so awkward to traverse, which isn't helped by the fact that these stages are so unnecessarily large. Right, so that was a little negative, but it's not the worst thing in the world. Trust me, I've played Jump Force before. There are a number of unique mechanics and gimmicks here that do keep the gameplay interesting. And by that I mean interesting in a good way, because everything I just talked about is interesting in a bad way. For starters, while every character has a number of special attacks, each character also has their own style action, which is completely unique to them. These can range heavily. For example, Jotaro's is that he uses Star Platinum to freeze time. There are Flash Bursts and Flash Cancels, where Flash Bursts allow you to break out of enemy combos, and Flash Cancels allow you to cancel attacks and extend combos. There are dual combos, which both teammates have to agree to, so good luck getting the AI to agree with you, where you both get given a temporary stat boost, and if you deal enough damage before the gauge depletes, you can finish off with a dual combo finish. There are also dual heat attacks, which are essentially your ultimate attacks, except these you end up performing with your teammate, and some pairs even have their own unique ultimates, which is a pretty nice addition. There's Soul Succession, which is basically if your teammate gets retired, as in they lose all their health, you receive a Soul Succession, which temporarily boosts your stats. Finally, all characters are divided into different battle styles, such as stand user, ripple user, etc., with each style fighting differently, sometimes with their own unique mechanics, such as mounted users being able to mount and dismount their horse, or vampires recovering health over time, unless it was dealt by a ripple attack. While there are a lot of cool mechanics here, it just can't help but feeling shallow and clunky. While yes, there are these advanced mechanics, there's really nothing too deep going on. And while you can play free battles both online and offline, what you're probably really here for is the story mode. If you're a JoJo fan, you'll definitely get some enjoyment out of this story mode. It was worked on by Araki himself, and the plot is a multiversal crossover featuring characters from different parts interacting with one another. It starts at the end of Stardust Crusaders after defeating Dio. Evil versions of Avdol and Iggy show up. After defeating them, young Speedwagon shows up and explains how he has found a piece of the Saint's corpse and is now using it to travel through time and space. From there you travel to different times, collecting pieces of the corpse before ultimately facing an alternate version of Dio. There are some nitpicks I have with it, like opting for the classic good guys turning bad, which saves on developing new characters for battles. And speaking of battles, the gameplay loop does get fairly repetitive at times, but to mix things up, there are a number of RPG elements here that you can focus on, such as skill trees and relationship meters. But what you're really here for is seeing the interactions between different characters. The game is fully voice acted, which is a really nice addition, and for the most part, we get actual cutscenes as opposed to just anime screenshots, which is always a welcome addition. This one is really for the fans though, because if you haven't seen JoJo's beyond part 1 and 2 and 5 episodes of Stardust Crusaders, then this is all going to be really lost on you. The character roster is also great, with 53 playable characters. Every character from All-Star Battle is back, along with 13 brand new characters. And like I mentioned earlier in regards to gameplay, each character belongs to a different battle style, and also has their own unique style action and special attacks, which makes each character feel pretty different from one another. The fan service even goes beyond just the story and characters. The overall presentation of this game is chock full of fun references. Each menu being represented by a different character, the loading screens, you're able to customize your characters with different costumes, victory poses, and voice lines, and not to mention in-game, before, during, and after battle, the characters will say unique voice lines depending on who they're teaming up with or going up against. Now, the only point of contention with this game's presentation is its graphics. Personally, I think it's I've seen people call the graphics ugly, and I can definitely see that perspective, but at the same time, they had to translate this into a 3D game, so I can cut them some slack. I do think that All-Star Battle looks better. Eyes of Heaven has some weird animation choices, and the models can look ugly at times, but I still think it's pretty faithful to the source material. And while I do loathe the stage design, I think the visuals of the stages look pretty cool. JoJo's Eyes of Heaven is a mixed bag. The amount of fan service, the large character roster, the original story are all great, but that core gameplay really just bogs it down. But that being said, if you're a fan of JoJo's, then you'll still definitely get some enjoyment out of this. And if I'm being perfectly honest, this is one of the least offensive games out there. Clearly they cared about this game. Even though they did reuse assets from All-Star Battle, they still put a lot of thought into this and included things they didn't even need to, like tons of collectibles, model viewers, a whole JoJo glossary. This was clearly made for fans of the series. If you want a deeper fighting game, then All-Star Battle is right there. I think this is the way to go about it. You have 2 JoJo games, one for the more competitive fans, and one for the more casual fans. Now, if only other anime could get a similar treatment.